What's up guys, and welcome to yet another ramble from yours truly. This will probably be my last ramble for a little while, because after this video, in the coming week or so after that, I will be finally releasing my series on effectively how I coach cubers with my cubing analysis service, using MaxPark as a case study. So that'll be a really interesting series, and I'm really hoping people enjoy that, but for now I thought I'd get one more ramble out there, just for the sake of it. And this one is one I've gotten quite a few requests for. It's basically on last layer lookahead, in particular using roll, and also an edge method I haven't been able to come up with a name for, and no one else has really looked into or developed, despite it being out there in the cubosphere for at least like 3 or so years. So preemptively, I'm just going to be naming it Joel, because my name is Jay, and it's just Joll, and I'm an egotist, and fuck it. We'll come up with better names for this stuff later. I think roll should be called headlights prediction. I think Joel, although I would like it named after me, I think it should realistically just be called EP Redux or EP prediction or something like that. But anyways, so first, what is roll? Because roll is a lot more well-known and developed than Joel, because it hasn't really had a name until now, and is also not quite as useful, but still very, very useful, especially the two in combination. I feel like both of these methods in isolation aren't that great, but when you combine them, your last layer look ahead can get pretty nasty. So, firstly, on roll, roll is corner prediction, so it's what I think should be called headlights prediction, because the way it works is for OLLs, where the alg you're doing doesn't give you an OLL CP, nor does it give you a diagonal PLL, which is E, N, either of the N's, V, or Y perm. So the only other case it could be is an edge corner swap, and there's 4 places the headlights could be. So for example, here, the headlights end up on left, and you can recognize that ahead of time by noticing that these two colors are opposite. The orange on this cube is pretty crap, but this is orange. And then these two colors are also opposite. So just from seeing that, you know headlights will be on the left, and most, not all, but most edge corner PLLs will have their headlights on the left. Most of the G perms do, J perm does, L perm does depending on the alg you use, the R perms do depending on the algs you use. I know at least one of them guaranteed has the one left. A perms don't, unfortunately. T and F both do. You get the idea, like most of them have the headlights on left. And how do you learn roll? Well, firstly you have to have a good understanding of CP recognition. I think the main prerequisite would be you can, for the most part, recognize when a certain alg will lead to a diag PLL or when it will lead to an OLL CP. Like, either just as an alg or like you getting an OLL CP skip, as it were. Or CP skip, I should say, since you're still doing an OLL. And the way you find cases like these, the main way that I found a lot of these was just through experience. Like, I would just see this OLL CP in solves and just be like, oh, I just know from experience that the headlights are on the left. But a way you can actually learn it is by reverse engineering it. So with this JPerm, you may want to know what the case looks like when you have to most likely do a U2 to get headlights on left. And funnily enough, it looks like the opposite case. So you have matching here, matching here. And when you see this, you can be sure that the headlights will be on the right. And you don't always need to do a U2, but for a lot of PLLs you do. The main nice thing about the headlights thing, I'll set up with like, say, okay, this isn't giving me a G-perm, let's just do it properly. So something kind of crappy like a G-perm, for example, we'll put headlights in back, like this. So the way you would recognize this roll is, you don't really think of it as headlights in back, although that might be the better way to think of it, but the way I usually think of it is so the way I recognize it is these two match this corner here, the orange and the blue, orange and blue. So I know through rough, U prime is most likely the move here. And even if it's not, you're doing a move that's more than likely setting you up into a good position, and at the very least, when you have headlights on left, I find that recognition can be a little bit nicer. I'll try and set up a better example of this. Actually, Alpha might be a good example. Yeah, that's actually a good example. Alright, so this is a better example of the headlights in back thing. Because if you don't think to do that U prime, what will end up happening is you'll just do this, and then from here you don't really see anything, because it's a lot easier to see PLLs from the headlights perspective, as it were. as opposed to the opposite. So when you do the U prime, you usually set yourself up nicely, and at the very least you will probably enhance your recognition a little bit. So that's how roll works, and that's how you can reverse engineer roll, and you can obviously do that with other algorithms. So another J-perm, and again headlights in back, so that equates to U prime. And if we do this, so this is for fat soon, if you have opposites here, or the OLLCP that gets solved like that, then you know after doing the fat soon, U prime is most likely to move. And sure enough it is for J-perm. So that's how roll works, but I think roll should realistically be renamed headlight prediction. And once again, this only works for cases where you're going to get an edge corner swap PLL. If you're going to get diag swap PLL, you may or may not want to learn an OLLCP depending on the OLL, and if you're going to get a CP skip, then, I mean, what more do you need to predict? You have it narrowed down to 4 PLLs, or even a skip, if you want to count that, so 5. Now we're going to go through a couple examples of roll beyond stuff like through rough and just easy stuff. So here we have this OLL. I solve it like lefty double fat soon. You could also do it from here like that. You could also do a U2 and then like that. But for this one, I know with these two corners, when these are opposites, there's only 2 relevant OLLCPs for this OLL. There's one where there's 2 matching here, and then there's one where there's 2 matching there. Because the other 2 that have like double matching or double opposite are just, again, they fall under the category of diag or OLLCP. But here I know these will be the headlights, effectively. So I know to do a U after OLL more than likely. And sure enough, doing the U was the move because I got F-perm, and F-perm has headlights on left. Here's another case. We have this OLL. It's pure soon because these are opposites and these are opposites. And I just know from experience, once again, I haven't really taken the time to learn a lot of these. I did learn a few more, like by brute force in my own time a little while ago, but for the most part, I've picked up basically all of these through experience, so there are like minor gaps in my knowledge. But this is one I actually did take the time to learn, and I know that after doing my OLL, which is F, UR, U prime, and then cancel into R prime, F prime, R stuff, after that I will have to do a U prime to put headlights on left. So we'll see what that gives us, and by doing a U... Okay, I got it wrong because I didn't know this case that well. So I actually had to do a U, but it technically worked out because this is one of those cases where you don't always want the headlights on the left because you can just do that G-perm. I'm gonna show the correct answer because... Wait, that's not even what I did. Hang on. Yep. So if I wasn't an idiot, what I should have done is know that with pure soon, I have to do a U, not a U prime. So that was my bad. Headlights will end up on front for pure soon here. And it's not quite the angle I want, but I can still do G-perm from there, and it's not that bad. I've timed the 2 algs, and I do lock up a lot in the R2, F2, and my execution for R2 fat U prime is pretty okay. Here, we have this OLL. Kind of a painful OLL for me. Feels bad, man, but we're going to go through it anyway. So we have matching colors here, matching colors here. And I know from experience that when I do the standard alg like that, it will give headlights on left, which is good. When you know you're going to get headlights on left, that's especially nice because that means most of the time you won't have to do any sort of U move after OLL and you're probably set up. So if you're looking for like a slightly smaller subset of cases to brute force learn, I would highly encourage you to learn the OLLCP that corresponds with headlights on left for your standard OLL alg. And what that basically means is just doing any PLL on your cube that puts headlights on left and then invert an OLL alg you want to know it for. So let's say, I don't know, what's a good example? We'll do the Colin Burns OLL for fun. So this one, when you have these 2 matching here and then these are opposites, I've now just learned that doing the Colin Burns OLL gives headlights on left. And that's good, a lot of the time. And same for this one, so matching, matching, this is another case of that, and then you get T-perm. Alright, last example of roll before I get into JOLL. Alright, so this OLL, this is kind of a tricky one because the way I execute, I mean I guess I could do it lefty, but I would probably do it from here. But still, because I started here, I noticed that these 2 are opposites and these 2 match. So I know if I do a U prime, and then I do the standard OLL, I'll have to do a U2 to get headlights on left. So this is a case that corresponds with headlights on right. Because the CP recognition for headlights on right is generally similar to headlights on left, if you were to brute force learn all of the OLLCP recognition association with headlights on left, you'll naturally pick up most of the ones where headlights end up on right. Because when these two are opposites and these two are opposites, doing the algorithm here does give headlights on left. A lot of the time it does end up being opposites like that. And that's another thing you'll kind of pick up with learning this. But yeah, anyways, you could do that, and then U2, and again, U2 here is the move. Alternatively, I guess I could do the lefty version instead, the force headlights on left, but that's really not something I consider too much in my solves. I think it's better to just focus on doing the good OLL. Okay, so that is how roll works. Now, how does joll work? So, joll is roll, but for edges. Now, unfortunately, with edges, you can't always get, like, perfect amount. In theory, you can, but the way I do it, which I think is a more practical EP prediction method, the way I do it, it doesn't always work out. So, joll. The way it works is you use two edges, and you use them to give you information, and there are 4 cases based on those 2 edges. Before I go into those examples, I guess I'll set something up. So, for Earth, for example. So this is one case where, and the 2 edges we look at usually are the 2 flipped edges, and the OLLs this applies to. So with roll applies to OLL CPs that don't go into solve CP or diag CP. Joll generally works for the 2 edge OLLs. So the 7 OLLs that have all edges oriented and the 7 dot OLLs, I don't really use it for them. You can use them for the dot OLLs because having flipped edges makes it easier to see the important colors. But for all edges oriented, you may as well just be using like ZB, OLLCP, just it's too annoying to recognize for those cases for it to really be worth it, especially when it doesn't always work out. So I like it a lot for the 2 edge OLLs, and again, this is something I never really took the time to learn. I just kind of picked it up intuitively through practice and experience. So here's an example of that. This OLL here, so going from solved to for Earth, I would always notice that these 2 edges are opposite, and when these 2 edges are opposite colors, this will give either solved edges, or it will give opposite swapped edges. And basically knowing where 2 opposite edges are going to be solved is a lot of useful information. So for this case, they would be solved. But if we had, say, Z-perm, it would still look like that. But still, you're reducing the number of PLLs you can get by a lot, especially when you're predicting opposite edges being solved like that, because most of the PLLs have an adjacent swap of edges somewhere. Let's set up another similar example of the same one. So yeah, this is another case where, again, opposite edges, and you might not think that's a lot of information, but when you combine it with roll, or I guess what should be called headlight prediction, you can reduce the number of PLLs from 21 to usually like less than 10, probably a lot less than 10 actually. And then here it gives a perm. So that's case number 1. When you have opposite edges like that, and you know that your OLL alg is going to solve those opposite edges, then you're going to have solved edges or opposite edges. Now another case, so how do I want to set this up? Perfect. Alright, so this is when you have opposite edges again, but you know your OLL alg doesn't solve the OLL when there's opposite edges here. I'll get another cube to demonstrate this. So Fatsoon, the 2 flipped edges are always adjacent for skips, like that. So that's kind of how the edges work. But when you have opposite edges, you're seeing opposite edges, but you know your alg is not going to solve those opposite edges, you know for a fact that you're going to have an adjacent permutation of edges. So that eliminates T-perm, F-perm, E-perm, both N-perms, both A-perms. I might have already said that. So what is it? T-perm, F-perm, A-perms, E-perm, N-perms. It still eliminates a decent number of PLLs, as you can see. And this is a fair bit more common, having this kind of case where you see opposite edges, but you know it won't solve them. So here, and as I predicted, there is an adjacent swap of edges somewhere. Another example. So again, same case, Fatsoon, I see opposite edges, but I know they won't be solved, so I know I could potentially get... I mean, there's a lot of PLLs I could get, but again, when you combine it with roll, I know I can't get diag PLLs, and I know I won't get solved CP PLLs, so I know it's going to be something to do with adjacent. And I could also predict headlights here as well. So like I know headlights will be on left for this. And with something like that, it really, really helps with PLL prediction. So that's the first two cases where you see opposite edges and you know they'll be solved, or when you see opposite edges and you know they won't be solved. The last two cases are unfortunately a little bit more annoying. Just a little bit, not too much. So let's set some stuff up. Okay, we'll start with... actually, let's not start with that. Let's start with... We'll start with... Okay, we'll start with this. So we've gone over the two cases where you see the two flipped edges are opposite colors. Here is when you see that the two flipped edges are adjacent colors. So back to this OL, we know from experience that when these two colors are opposite, that you will get the solved or opposite edges. So therefore, when these are adjacent and you know they solve opposites, that means it has to give you an adjacent swap of edges. It could get a little bit confusing from here, but that is how it works. So every time you see adjacent and you know your alg does opposite, it's going to give you adjacent, like that. So that's the third of the four cases. So we've gone over both the seeing opposite edges. So when you know it'll solve them, you get opposite edges solved. When you know it won't, you know you get adjacent. Then when you see adjacent and you know opposite solves it usually, that will also give you adjacent. But what happens when you see adjacent and you know your alg solves adjacent, like with fat soon? You would think that means, oh, naturally my edges will be solved opposite. That's not what happens, unfortunately. And the reason that doesn't happen is because just because you know where these two edges will be, that doesn't give you any information about these edges. So the main premise of JOLL is knowing where opposite edges will be. And sometimes you just don't know. And again, you could modify the recognition system such that you're looking at other edges like this one or this one, but I think that can get a little bit counterintuitive, and I can't fully recommend that at the moment. But maybe someone can explore that and refine this whole methodology of PLL prediction and see where it takes them. But for now, the way JOLL works is we work with flipped edges because they're just a lot easier to see. So suppose I were to flip these two edges here and then mess with these corners here. So we'll do a J-turn from here and then fix the corners like that. So again, we have adjacent edges and we know our alg solves adjacent. This is the 1 in 4 case where JOLL kind of sucks because it doesn't really tell you anything. You could have opposite solved edges or you could have adjacent. Here it gives adjacent, and then once again if we do that J-turn thing, here it gives you solved. But the other 3 out of 4 times it will give you good information. And when you combine it with roll, you're usually getting a bit more information anyways. So it seems kind of annoying, but it's really not that bad. And lastly, I do want to touch on, again, how it can theoretically be used for other OLLs, but it's not really that big of a deal. So let's go. So .OLLs. Because there's 4 misoriented edges, your brain doesn't really naturally focus on any 2 particular edges, and this is more or less why I kind of intuitively picked it up for the 2-edge OLLs like these. Whereas for the 4 edges, like, I never really saw, like, oh, when these two are opposite, it gives opposite solved edges. I just never really picked up on that. Theoretically, you could, and I think there is a bit more flexibility with the .OLLs because you can choose which 2 edges to focus on. But it's not something I've personally implemented myself, so it probably is worthwhile, but the other thing is .OLLs are so rare, especially for me, that I'm not going to really take the time to learn this, but you could technically use it for dots. And then for all edge cases like these, you have to like look at the sides, which is just a little bit more annoying, and again, you have so many more options when all of your edges are oriented. You can do ZB, you can do COLL. ROLL is still really nice for the soons, in my opinion, but for the other ones, I think you mostly want to be doing a bit of COLL stuff, or if not ZB. But I mean, yeah, you can if you want. It's certainly possible. But now we're going to get into Final 4 examples, so I'm going to be going through these, and I'll also be applying roll on top of these as well. So yeah, but these cover the 4 cases we've gone over before for what I'm going to call JOLL, which is a specific type of EP prediction only for the 2-edge OLLs, and because I haven't implemented it for dots and I think it's kind of useless for non-dots, we'll call those subsets something that isn't JOLL. So this is JOLL. Hi JOLL. Alright, so this OLL, we have these 2 edges here. We notice that they are opposites. And I know through experience that for this OLL, when these 2 edges are opposites, you get solved opposite edges, which is the best case because it gives you the biggest reduction of PLL cases. And on top of that, with the corners, I know from experience that with this case, headlights are going to end up on the left. So I know that edges are going to be solved opposite of each other and headlights will be on left. This is another minor tidbit that I just know through experience. This isn't going under roll or joll, this is just going under random crap JCs. I know from experience that when these edges here match the corners in some way, so either 2 straight lines or like a checkerboard thing, it'll either go into T-perm or F-perm. So I actually know that this will guaranteed go into A-perm. So I've just reduced 21 PLLs down to 2. That's pretty damn good. So it's not just about combining roll and joll, but you can add other stuff to it as well, just through experience. Experience, in general with cubing, nothing really beats experience. Like getting better at things related to cubing, nothing beats experience. Getting better at competing under pressure and things like that. Like there's stuff I can talk about and ramble about, but like again, nothing really beats experience. And this is a great case of that. So I know because it'll be an A-perm, headlights on left isn't really great because I will have to do some sort of AUF, but at least I've reduced it down to 2. Like so. Here, so we have this OLL case, these 2 edges are opposite, but again, I know through experience that this OLL normally does not get solved with opposite edges. And I'll set it up badly because I can't invert. And yes, so these are adjacent, and this alg solves adjacent. And if I was recognizing this particular case, I wouldn't necessarily know I'm going to get opposite edges solved again because of what I said before. When you see adjacent and you know the alg solves adjacent, then that's kind of poo-poo. But when you see opposite and you know your alg normally does adjacent, that means you know the edges have to be adjacently permuted in some way. Alright, that was a mouthful. On top of that, this is a bit of an iffy case for me. I'm pretty sure that headlights will be on right, I think. I'm pretty sure they will be on right after the alg. So I know headlights will be here, and I know there'll be an adjacent swap somewhere, so I most likely want to do a U2. And I also know that it won't be like A-perm. It won't be either of the A's or T or F. So I've reduced 4 of the adjacent PLLs, but the rest are still there. And there's kind of a lot, but again, you've still reduced... You've gotten rid of all the diags, you've gotten rid of all the EPLLs, and you've gotten rid of 4 of the adjacents. So that's pretty damn good. And you also know most likely which AUF you want to do. There was no other additional stuff I knew from experience from there. There was like a blocked solved, but I knew it wouldn't be preserved, which doesn't really give you much. Well, it never really gives you much for adjacent PLLs, because with every adjacent corner swap PLL, there will be a block somewhere no matter what. It's really only when you're preserving 2 blocks that it gets pretty juicy. Here we have actually the same OLL CP from before, and this is kind of boring, so I'm going to actually mess with this a little bit. Because we already know, like, this will give headlights on the left with the alg I do. Let's do a T-perm. T-perms are fun. Alright, okay. So this is actually a nice example, because once again, this looks like the opposite case from before. Before we had 2 matching here, 2 matching here, now we have checkerboard. And once again, this is something you will pick up pretty quickly. The opposite cases of headlights on left prediction will generally correlate to headlights on right prediction, and that is what will happen here with roll, or what I think should be renamed to headlight prediction. Please let headlight prediction catch on. For the love of God, roll is a crap name. And then for the edges, we know from before that when these edges are opposite, the alg will solve them to their opposite spots. Therefore, when they are adjacent, we know that the alg we do will lead to an adjacent swap. So we know there's going to be adjacent, and once again we know headlights are on right, so most likely need to do a U2. And here we don't really, we can actually just cancel into a G-perm. And that's another kind of through experience thing you'll pick up on. Because when you're reducing PLLs so much, because once again, we got rid of all the diags, got rid of all the EPLLs because of CP, and then because of the edges, we eliminated both A's, T, and F. And when I say headlights mostly end up on left, the two main cases that mess that up are the A-perms. A lot of the adjacent corner and adjacent edge swap PLLs have headlights on left. Like I think there's three that don't for me, and depending on the algs you use, it could be reduced to like 1, maybe 0, but doing this R-perm is kind of silly. Even though it's okay. I don't know if it's worth learning that just for roll and joll, or headlight prediction and joll. Last case. Alright. So this is the crappy case from before. Again, it is a fat soon, but whatever. This is actually a good example of, again, crap you learn just through experience. So, CP, here roll isn't... I mean, it's not that roll is bad or headlight prediction is bad, it's just it's just not really the case here. Opposites, opposites, this means CP will be solved, so this isn't actually a headlight prediction case or a roll case. Edges, we know that when these are adjacent, so when we see adjacent, we know the alg solves adjacent, which means we don't really get any information. But here's something I think a lot of you guys know. Fat soon is solved when these blocks are here, and it's the same CP. We see one block here, but not here. So you know what this means? It means we absolutely have to get a U-perm. And on top of that, we know where the solved edge will be. It's the orange one. So technically you could use that to know that you have to do some kind of AUF based on this center, but the important thing that you would pick up on is you see this and this, and the CP obviously, and you know you have to get a U-perm. So this, again, I have to file it under random crap, but you've reduced the PLL possibility from 21 to 2. As opposed to using just pure roll and joll, you would have it reduced to H-perm and Z-perm being a possibility, even though this block, it's not that hard to learn that through experience. So that's in, and then we have U-perm. So those are a couple examples of how roll works, although once again, please let headlight prediction catch on. I think headlight prediction is just a much better name for it because it actually describes what the method does, and it's not named after someone like me. Joll, on the other hand, I don't know, Joel's pretty cool. I reckon Jay's a pretty cool guy. I reckon let him have something named after himself for once, after all he's done for the community. Alright, or you could call it EP Redux, or EP Reduce Predict. I don't know, something to do with that, if you want. I'm legitimately cool with that too. But regardless, that's going to be the last ramble for a little while. The next videos that will be on my channel, which are very, very exciting, how I do the solve analysis process that people pay for and people love because it's great. And there'll be 3 videos on that. We'll be using Max Park as a case study, and I think whether or not you want to invest in the service, looking at his solves in this analytical way, I think will be a big benefit to a lot of people in the community, and has... I've already filmed a couple of the videos, and some of the topics that come up, like, I could realistically make like 5 rambles out of that video, if not more. Just talking about stuff that Max Park does. But anyways, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my dank video series coming soon.